Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. 2 for 1 now for Veni Vidi Vici after picking up probably the most confident game we have seen coming into this series, even though Pan have delivered on the Jaggermaw composition. This was just blown out of the water. Every single lane doing so well after that initial collapse on the bot lane.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Whipple's Nautilus. He played it in the semi-finals and did nearly the exact same thing. It was these great TP flanks that came in consistently and ended up picking up all these kills and getting the dives that they needed. And you could see it in that bot lane gank as well. That was just so good. He was able to come in and tanks it perfectly, time and time again. We saw it just in the replay that was there. He ends up tanking almost entirely all of his health bar and pops the shit at the last second and walks out scot-free. It's just fantastic play.
Yeah, and I think this is what we've come down to, is basically it is a game of junglers and top laners. Whoever has early advantages, early pushing, early invades as well on Maxilol, or counter ganks is what we've seen drag it back for Ploxy. So it's all about playing to these early game advantages, which, coming back to the draft, we were really confused with this Gangplank pick based on how the series is going. Why not go for something like the Renekton that you can blind pick and almost always win the early game? Yeah,
and I think what highlights that the most is that it was the exact same junglers, but two entirely different stories this game. And it was that pressure that came from the solo laners, particularly that top side of the map. Once you start to push in, you get that advantage. That's the signal for both these guys to invade. And we saw two very different stories with the invade. Maxilol, for one, was able to get off great invades. He got the kill where he went down to the bot side, picked up that early kill around the 8-minute mark. Whereas when we saw the exact same play with the, basically as that happened, we saw the gank that came through, the collapse even that came through when he tried to invade on the red buff. So it's two very different stories from game to game based on this pressure.
So I have a really specific question coming back to the pick and ban phase. We were obviously expecting the Juggermaw not to go through this time around. However, I was wondering which part of the composition is going to be actually targeted. I expected the Lulu because Lulu just did so consistently well in all of these games so far. However, they banned the Kog'Maw, let the Lulu through, and as the casters mentioned, this is the first time Lulu, even though she wins the lane, loses the game.
And something we were really confused as when they started this draft is they go for this Lulu first pick. That's fine. The Graves Kate picked against them, so you go, oh, they've handed away the Syndra, and you want to take your AD carry now. And then they just left it open. They take the Lee Sin instead. They focus towards this jungle pressure, whereas they could have gone, even if you double ban the jungle after that point, you take away Lee Sin, there's still things like Rengar available, Kha'Zix available, even Nidalee if he's so inclined. Like, there's still, or not Nidalee, of course, it was banned away, but like, there's so many junglers available to you. Rek'Sai has also been picked up by this guy.
Yep.
Why is that your focus when clearly the AD carries have been banned out?
Yeah, and I think we're talking about the Kalista pick. None of us really liked it, particularly when you've got so much AoE that's coming through and so much to just keep her out of these fights. The Zyra ultimate goes down, you can't move in. The Orianna ball is anywhere near you, you can't move in. And then you've got that point and click CC, which is why I really like the Nautilus pick up here, was just to lock her down as well. So Kalista is a non-factor in any of these fights because she can't get in to deal any damage because there's so much that can just lock her up and she goes down.
Which is why we were expecting the Ezreal pickup.
Yeah.
Which just never came through. And we saw this Kalista, and we were talking about all these disadvantages, and we were like, yes, they could play the early lane well, and in fairness to them, they absolutely did. They had this really solid early push going on. But then the jungler comes down, completely negates it, and the game just is effectively ending slowly from there.
Yeah. And talk about the junglers, props to the Lee Sin, because he was always trying to invade, even though it initially didn't seem like that great of an idea. 8 minutes into the game, we see Pam trying to force once again pushing the enemy out of the jungle, but it just doesn't happen.
And this is the thing, they saw Graves on the bottom side of the map, so in theory, yes, this is a good idea, but Gangplank's nowhere to be found in that fight. You're left end up with the 2-on-2, and then it's just the Zyra who comes in to finish it up and just wipe you away. So in theory, yes, it's a good idea, but you got to look at what's actually there. And when you don't have the support of your top laner, that's never a good idea because it's too easy for them to make a play like that.
And it's something that people talk about. If you look towards solo queue, you'll always see, don't bother ganking Gangplank, he can't follow up.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same when you go for these kind of jungle invades and team play. There's no follow-up there. He doesn't provide any CC, his early damage is lacking, he can't really place early barrel combos to like level 11, 13-ish. He's not useful until you get towards at least the mid-game, realistically looking towards the late game. And that's why we're so confused about this style of comp, where like every game has been won in the early to mid-game. You're picking scalers. Just seems really odd choice when you seem to have no way to win out or help your jungler.
And we have seen in this replay the initial invades being shut down, meaning that Pam was just falling slightly behind. However, with this next replay rolling out, this is the point where it just all goes bad.
This is the top lane difference right here. Nautilus is able to come down, TP down, and there's no response from Gangplank. Yes, he can ultimate, but it doesn't matter. You have this massively tanky early game Nautilus who now picks up a triple kill for himself. That only further snowballs this pressure, but this is just an effect, and it just continues to snowball based on that, because he's able to comfortably tank these towers just because of the pick that's in it. And you then see that they've already gained vision control of this part of the map, which leads to another kill in the mid laner.
Yeah, and I really like the way they play around, as you're saying, the scaler in the top lane, that Gangplank. He's only got the Sheen there and the Nash's Tooth. He's not able to do particularly much with that. So, sorry, the Stinger even. So when he comes into the bottom lane, it means that then you've got this tank that can just soak up everything, and it's utilizing that early pressure and these early advantages that a lot of teams haven't really realized, but these guys have nailed it.
And again, looking forward, I think one of the biggest things they should be changing is you had the option, lock in that Renekton. That wins nearly every early lane. Yes, he unfortunately lost to the Galio, but you can play around that, play it slightly better. Even then, even if both of you follow into the jungle, you're at least even.
And then basically, after Veni Vidi Vici propelled ahead, utilizing this great teleport play, for example, it all came down to the Baron Nashor dance, because every single time Gangplank's ultimate was available, Pam was able to force Veni Vidi Vici away from Baron, but as soon as it went on cooldown, Veni Vidi Vici just continued the Baron dance and eventually succeeded in taking it.
And that's one of the things, that was actually Polite and Mature's very little bit of avenue into the game, because they were actually stalling it out quite well. They were using the Gangplank ultimate. They were actually using Kakan as well, long range Scatter the Weaks to try keep people away from it. But what happened was, for some reason, Kakan walks entirely too far up, very little vision, gets caught out by, I think, 3 members at once, and just like, okay, once they don't have a mid laner, there's very little they can actually contest. And we thought the same was going to happen when Lee Sin got caught out, but they managed to recover that again with a good Gangplank ultimate. So it was a solid stall dance, failed because they just lacked the vision or playing around their lack of vision.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Kakan actually wrapped around up into the enemy jungle and was trying to come down that way to get into this fight, which is so weird, which means that Quickset kind of has to play between two sides of his team. Does he try and stay with the guys who are dancing around the barn, or can he try and save the Syndra who's been caught out? So it ends up being the Syndra and Quickset who are running away from the team, which means they get caught out, and then it just means that they're able to get these picks. And then I saw again in that top lane, he was so far pushed up with no vision, and then it's an easy pick up for the Baron.
Exactly, and even though the casters mentioned as well that Gangplank was the only member of PAM who consistently was able to outfarm the Nautilus, it doesn't matter when you lost every single tier 2 turret already.
DD is winning in farm every game, but it's more about the effect he can have in that game with that farm. We saw in the first game, you can't have a big effect on Yasuo, you're not in the late game yet. This game, you're Gangplank, you're not the late game, you don't have any effect yet. And that's what VVV are playing quite well. They're forcing their advantage as early as possible to avoid any of that scaling, which is something we saw PAM not really pressured to do so in previous series. We saw in the quarters and semis, they comfortably ended their own games in that mid to late game because they were pulling easier solo advantages. VVV are doing really well to early pressure this, which is putting PAM on the back foot.
And with that in mind, VVV actually has match point coming into Game 4, which is not something we initially expected on the analyst desk. However, I'm really interested to how the casters are actually feeling about this initial 3 pick and ban phase that we have seen. What are you guys wanting to come out of this 4th one?
Well, first things first, greetings summoners and welcome back.